First of all, a shout out to Jade Carey for winning gold on the floor. I think like many of you, I slept through event finals for floor because it was in the middle of the night. Woke up, groggily Googled Jade Carey floor, was ecstatic to see her gold medal after what was probably one of the most devastating days of her life with the vault finals. And of course, all of the injustice of athletes not getting warm-ups for such difficult vaults. So it's exciting to see the sport of gymnastics starting to change and the pressure to change the sport from within, and that the athletes get a say in what's not working for them and what they need for the safety of their bodies, which is why I'm recording this series. I'm Dr. Kimberly George. I'm the founder of Feminism School. I'm also a former gymnast, and I take a lot of joy in watching the changes that athletes are leading in our culture. And like many of you have just been astounded at this new representation that Simone Biles has given the sport of gymnastics. And that representation is consent, that an athlete can say yes, they can say no, that they get to decide what's best for their own body and what's safe for their own body, and that coaching can be a collaborative relationship instead of a relationship based on hierarchy, abuse, and control, which has been the norm for USA Gymnastics. I know that when I was a kid in gymnastics, there was almost no representation of athletes getting to say yes or no and have true agency over their own body. There wasn't a category of consent within the sport of gymnastics. I remember one athlete on our team walked out of the gym one day amidst my coach's abusive behavior, and she was demonized as the bad girl in the gym. Looking back, she was the one who knew what was up, and she knew that we needed to contest that kind of abusive power. When Simone made the decision that she did, she gave us a representation that has never existed and in the sport of gymnastics. And what I study as a feminist scholar is I study the changes, plural, in history that created different possibilities and a different future. So we live under these systems of white supremacy, patriarchy, hierarchy that are fundamentally unjust and based on making people into objects, dehumanizing their bodies, using their life energy to serve these different structures of power. So for instance, with the Caroli's coaching for so long and their abusive norms setting the tone for USA Gymnastics, that was a system that was about using the athletes for the glory of the coaches, the glory of the nation. And what athletes like Simone are doing and others are saying, we're the ones who are making the choice to really sacrifice our life energy to the sport. We get to set the terms of when we perform and when we don't perform. And I just want us to think about what it means that we now can talk about consent in the sport of gymnastics. And I think there's many applications to other sports. Of course, we want to think about consent with the Me Too movement and the widespread abuse in the sport of gymnastics. But we also want to think about consent in terms of the athlete's right to say yes or no to when they perform, when certain days are not the right days for performing a skill. Too much of coaching is still about asserting power. It's not about collaboration and trusting that the athlete knows her body. She knows what days she can and cannot perform these types of skills. And with the super high level of difficulty in the sport of gymnastics, it's never been more important that we develop this category of consent and that athletes give consent to when they're going to perform. Because I look at the history of feminism, I look at the history of change of women's rights, and of course, women's rights connects to the rights of all humans. These systems of power we're struggling against are suppressing and dominating people of all genders. But what feminists are good at is seeing the interconnections between systems of gender and other hierarchies. So when I saw what Simone did as a feminist theorist, I immediately thought about what happened when in the United States, we developed a category of consent within marriage, because it wasn't until the early to mid 1990s that marital rape became illegal in the United States law. There was not a category of consent for a woman's right to her own agency, her own body in marriage. And we had to change the law. We had to change cultural consciousness. We are obviously still amidst changing cultural consciousness around consent. But I give you that example because in the changes in history, uh, different moments align. There's a lot of bravery from a lot of people, and their leadership, like the leadership of Simone Biles, is a game changer because it creates a whole new category in our consciousness. I can guarantee you, for all gymnasts and former gymnasts, when Simone Biles did what she did, we went back in our minds and we thought about all those injuries, all those days in the gym when we couldn't say yes, we couldn't say no in an honest way, and we got super, super injured. I mean, most of my injuries were from abusive coaching. And I think we never really want to blame people for our injuries. But the reality is, in this kind of dominant system of coaching, based on abuse and control, you get injured when you don't need to be injured. And so I'm really excited to see this sea change in gymnastics. And I'm excited to see the ripple effects for other sports, because we're just starting to talk about consent for athletes. And I think there's something amazing that we're on the cusp of. And what's been so exciting about this Olympics and gymnastics in this Olympics is we're seeing the labor of so many athletes and gymnasts who have been fighting so hard to change the sport. And we're starting to see the possibilities here.